Hello and welcome to episode 19 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltandPA.com. I am Walt, of course, and today I have a show that is probably going to run a little bit shorter than usual. I had a really busy weekend and had a really busy day today, and as a result, I was kind of running around like a chicken with his head cut off, trying to put the show together at the last minute. And actually, it is so last minute that I, as of right now, I still have no discussion topic for the end of the podcast. So, even though this is usually, a shooting from the hip kind of podcast where I just kind of go with the flow of things, today it's a little more disoriented than usual, or a little more disorganized than usual. So I'm going to do my best to keep everything moving, and I'm going to try to get you a podcast at least a half an hour long, ideally half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that, just to get you through until next week when, maybe I'll have a little bit more time and I'm able to put together, a better podcast, so to speak. So, with that said, before we get into the news, I like to do a couple of just random discussion topics, and the first one I want to talk about is my results, or kind of my week one impressions of carrying the buck knife as an everyday carry knife, courtesy of Cajun Blaze, and I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. I'm not real crazy about it. I knew going into this, after carrying the Spyderco Native 4 and Delica, that the buck knife was going to be a little bit of a challenge because it carries a little different. It has a different shape. It's actually a little bit longer than the Spydercos, and I was just kind of going into it knowing that it was going to be a little bit different, and it was going to be an uphill battle. The very first thing that I'm not real crazy about is that the clip is not adjustable. I can't move it around, and as a result, I'm forced to carry the knife tip down, and I've gotten really comfortable with carrying tip up. As the knife comes out, it just seems oriented in the hand properly to open it. With tip down carry, I feel like I have to kind of switch my hand and do some maneuvers with the knife to get it in a position where I can open it easily. Aside from that, it feels bigger in the pocket. It just feels like it takes up more space. When my hand goes into my pocket, I feel like I'm kind of grinding on the knife a little bit. It doesn't kind of slip away in the back of the pocket. It's there, it stands out, and it's been fairly noticeable. I mean, I don't know how discreet the Spyderco knives have been, but this just seems like it's out there when it's hanging on my pocket, or inside the pocket with the clip on the outside. It just feels as though it's not so discreet as the other knives. The next challenge with this knife is getting used to the stud. The knife I carried previous to this the knife I had previous to doing these everyday carry updates with these new knives used to have a stud on the blade, and I got accustomed to operating it, and it wasn't a big deal. I got comfortable with it, proficient with it, and switching over to the Spyderco with the hole in the blade, I found myself getting really comfortable with it and preferring it much, much more than trying to grab this stud or this knob hanging off the blade and using it to operate the knife. I just really prefer the hole, and it's been kind of a learning experience all over again to get used to using that knob or that stud to open the knife. The handle is, I'm not sure whether it's some kind of resin or it's plastic, but it feels kind of flimsy. I can actually squeeze it and it moves. And when you get the knife in your hand, you get a good grip of it. I can feel my hand moving the plastic around, which I'm not real thrilled about. The nice thing about the handle being all plastic with no inserts, it's really light. This knife doesn't weigh much of anything, and it's a little bit larger than the other Spyderco knives I was carrying, the Delica 4. So I've got a little bit more blade to deal with, and weight-wise, the buck knife definitely feels lighter. And it's a bit nicer to carry because of how much lighter it is. However, it feels as though it takes up more real estate in the pocket. On the Pro side, it's nice and light. It's easy to carry in that sense. It's comfortable in my hand as long as I don't need to grab the knife tightly. If I'm doing some light cutting, it's really not a big deal. However, if I'm doing something that takes a little bit of force, I feel the grip moving in my hand, and I'm not real comfortable with that. Having the extra size of the blade is nice. I haven't really run into a situation where I needed a little extra blade, but it's nice knowing that it's there if I need it, as opposed to the other knives that I was carrying, the Spyderco Delica 4 and the Native 4. I just happen to have the Delica 4 sitting next to me. So that is week 1 carrying the buck knife. I'm not quite sure what model it is. I should probably look that up and include that into the podcast for those that are listening via MP3, so that you can get a general idea of what I'm carrying, instead of me relying on you looking at the camera and saying, hey, I know what knife that is. It looks familiar. Last week I did some featured content on a video I came across on AmmoLand featuring Doug Koenig doing some speed reload drills. Ever since I came across that video, I've been doing a little bit more dry fire practice. It's been probably a month, or coming up on a month, since I've been to the range. And to try to keep myself in shooting shape, for lack of a better word, I've been doing a bit more dry fire practice. And while doing some speed reloads and dry firing in the house, I had another issue pop up with my M&P, which is kind of driving me crazy. I absolutely love the gun, but it's driving me absolutely mad. You know, first I had some issues with rust, and then after that I had some issues with rust on the magazines, which was probably user error. And then I had, at some point along the way, I had the front sight, or I had the white dot inside of my front sight post pop out. While I was dry fire practicing, I had one of the white dots in my rear sight pop out. So now, as it stands in my M&P, I have a pink front sight, I have a white left rear sight, and I have a black right rear sight. So I've got all this dysfunctional color problems going on with the sights, and it's kind of aggravating, because now I need to go and figure out a way to repaint the rear sight. I mean, it's probably as simple as just going out and buying white paint and refilling it, but how often is this going to happen? Am I going to run into this issue every couple of weeks, or every couple of months, or every 1,000 rounds, or every 2,000 rounds, where I have the paint popping out of the metal sight post? Whether I thought it was just the front sight post, but now I guess it's possible for it to pop out of the rear sight post as well. So I'm not quite sure whether or not I want to repaint the sights, or if I should just put some money together and go out and get a fiber optic sight set up. At one point in time, I was looking at changing over the sights, and I got a price quote, I think, of about $160 to do both front and rear. The gun shop that I would buy them from would install them for me, and they were telling me that if they weren't busy, they would do it while I waited. So, you know, it seemed really convenient and nice. However, you know, I didn't have that $160 or $170, whatever it was at the time, and I kind of put it out of my mind. Well, when I bought my Smith & Wesson Bodyguard, right before I left, I got to talking to the owner of the shop about putting new sights on my M&P, because at this point in time I was still dealing with a black sight post. I hadn't even painted it at this point. So he had mentioned that one of the things that a lot of people are doing are just putting a fiber optic in the front sight, rather than replacing both front and rear. And he was telling me that if I want to put a fiber optic front sight post in, that it could be as little as like $27 or something like that installed. So I was kind of thinking about it, and now that the white dot in the rear popped out, you know, now I'm back to thinking maybe I'll do front and rear. I would love to get some adjustable sights, not that I really need them, but I kind of would like to get adjustable rear fiber optic with a different color fiber optic front, but I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. But since all this dry fire practice made me lose another white dot in my M&P, I thought I would mention it. Before we get into the news, I had one other item that I kind of wanted to mention in passing, and that was earlier, I don't know whether it was earlier this morning or last night sometime, I received an email from juliegolub.com regarding the free bookmark offer with pre-ordering her book. And it was to let me know that my submission was received, my bookmark was in the mail, I believe, and I was one of the 500 members to pre-order the book and receive this personalized bookmark. So if you're if you were on the fence about pre-ordering the book to get a hold of or taking advantage of the option to pre-order to get a personalized bookmark, I'm not quite sure where you're going to fall. I would think at this point, since bookmarks are in the mail, either they have received all 500 or all 500 bookmarks have been accounted for or spoken for, or they've got to be getting pretty close. I just thought it would be worth mentioning since I've been talking about the book here and there. As I said before, I pre-ordered the book, and then a couple of weeks later there was a promotional offer for a personalized bookmark for anyone that pre-ordered the book. So I registered for a free bookmark since I pre-ordered the book, and this is kind of a little update along the way. So with that said, with all of these little random thoughts that are floating around in my head all out in the open and taken care of, let's get into the news. Well, in this episode I only have 2 pieces of news for you. As I mentioned, things were just really hectic this week, and I didn't spend a whole lot of time in front of my computer over the weekend. So when I sat down to do the show notes for the podcast today, I was absolutely buried in podcast news, Google alerts, and it was just a lot of repetitive stuff. And after looking at close to 300 of them, I just kind of got sick of searching and called it quits after 2. Actually, at the time I only had 1, and the last piece is not really a piece of news, it's just an opinion piece on a news site. So here's what I've got for you. The first piece of news comes from the Journal-Sentinel. This is from Milwaukee, and it is from their news and opinion blog. It is entitled, "Bill Would Ban Guns from Gas Stations." This was written by Bruce. Wow, I should really think twice about giving credit to who's yeah, I should really think twice about giving credit. That's not the case. I should really think twice about just blurting out their names without having spent some time trying to figure out how to phonetically say it or spell it, because I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. Vale Medi, I believe. But anyway, the article goes on to say, or actually it was published on December 11th, and the article goes on to say, just as thousands of Wisconsin residents are starting to use their new permits to carry concealed weapons, a Milwaukee lawmaker has proposed making gas stations off limits. Assembly Bill 406's sponsor, Rep. Josh Zepnick, Democrat, Milwaukee, said many station owners, employees, and customers are among his constituents and have suffered ongoing violent crime at and around the business. This is a serious pattern of crime that has escalated, presumably due to tough economic times and the ease of getting in and out of a gas station for criminal activity, Zepnick said in an email. He noted that he has attended the funerals of 2 gas station workers murdered on the job. He knows it will be a long shot for passage in a Republican-controlled legislature that's shown more interest in expanding gun rights than adding restrictions to new carry rules. In short, this is a work in progress, he said. Isolating one form of business for certain protection is not easy from a legislation standpoint, and all I can do is keep trying. The bill would also upgrade to felonies any act of theft or criminal damage to property at a gas station. Zepnick said the hope is that increased punishment might help break the pattern of gas stations being targeted for crime. The bill also says it was co-sponsored by Rep. Christine Sinicki, Democrat, Milwaukee, but she said her name was put on the bill by mistake. Officials with the Wisconsin Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Store Association were also in meetings Friday, a staffer said, and did not respond to emails. Zepnick said he has had some input from the group, but it did not initiate the bill. Nick Clark, chairman of Wisconsin Carry Incorporated, predicts the bill has absolutely no chance of passage in Wisconsin, and that the trend nationally is to expand where those permits can legally carry guns. Where those with permits can legally carry guns. With that said, if I was anti-gun and I wanted to chip away at the law, I would want to do it right away, because in a year, reality will be established that carry by the law-abiding will present 0 negative side effects, Clark said. There's no doubt that around parts of Milwaukee, plenty of shootings and armed robberies occur at gas stations. Zepnik's bill would essentially treat stations like some other places even CCW permit holders would have to disarm, like courthouses, prisons, and schools. But it would also allow the usual suspects, or the usual exceptions, for police, corrections officers, and military personnel and private security guards who are on duty. But going armed at a station would be a felony punishable by up to 18 months in prison. As though it is, and though it's unclear how it relates to guns and gasoline, a section of the bill calls for allowing officials to publicize the names of escaped juvenile delinquents. Zepnik did not address this question, or did not address a question about that. So, this is one of those things that make you just kind of want to bang your head on the table. Robbing gas stations is illegal. Assaulting people is illegal. The destruction of property at a gas station is already illegal. So if all the criminal activity is already illegal, what difference does it make whether or not you make guns illegal at a gas station? Which makes absolutely no sense. I mean, think about this. You're intent on robbing this place. You're going in there with a gun. You're going to take all the guy's money and get out of there. Does it really make a difference whether or not you're permitted to carry the gun? You're already going in there with the intent of committing a crime. You're going to rob the guy. You know, are you going to sit back and think, well, you know what? If they stack all these charges against me, I'm going to be in jail forever? What difference does it make? You're walking in there with a gun, and you may just shoot the clerk and murder him. I mean, what more are you going to get than life in prison? What difference does it make? All these little petty crimes that add up, and whether or not you could face 18 months in prison for carrying a gun on gas station property. It's just absurd, to be, completely honest with you. I think that this is just stupid. It really is, and I hate to call things stupid and bust people's chops, but in this case, this is a stupid idea, and it makes absolutely no sense. For the second of two pieces of news, now, as I mentioned earlier, I have an opinion piece that really wasn't even going to make the show, but since I had one piece of news for the entire news segment, I felt that I needed to select something and put it in there, and this was one of the more interesting things that I read in that very, very long list of news items, or news alerts. So with that said, this comes from the Nassau Telegraph, and it is written by Zachary Zalner Iadis, I believe. And it goes on to say, it is entitled, "Students Should Be Able to Carry Guns on Campus," and this was published Sunday, December 11th. And this is guest commentary. It goes on to say, in January, the New Hampshire legislature is lined up to be the next to confront the hotly debated subject of concealed carry on campus. Passed by the House Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee in late October, HB 334 reasserts the state's sole authority to regulate firearms and prevents the university system of New Hampshire from denying licensed, law-abiding citizens the option of carrying firearms for self-defense on university campuses. Concealed carry on campus is primarily an issue of whether licensed citizens who responsibly carry a firearm for self-defense everywhere else in their lives should be rendered vulnerable simply because they choose to pursue higher education or are called on to educate the next generation of leaders. Why would students and faculty need to carry firearms for self-defense? The reason is quite simple. Crime happens on college campuses. From assaults and robberies to rapes and murders, college campuses are not immune to crime. An individual who already intends to commit a crime is not deterred by a sign saying firearms are banned. Why then should university officials deny the option of effective self-defense to law-abiding citizens because they cross a property line onto campus? Contrary to misinformation being spread about campus carry, this bill would not put guns in the hands of thousands of new people. The citizens who have a concealed firearm on campus are the same ones who responsibly carry at the grocery store, movie theater, and gas station without incident. But how do legislators and campus carry advocates know the bill would not result in campus shooting galleries when these individuals are allowed to carry their concealed firearms? Fortunately, there is significant evidence from more than 200 campuses in 6 states that now allow campus carry. Since Colorado State University first decriminalized self-defense in 2004, there is yet to be a negative incident on any campus involving a lawfully armed citizen. For those who say they would feel uncomfortable with the idea of students and faculty being armed around them on campus, do they also feel uncomfortable walking around in public? The basic premise behind concealed carry is that people around you are not aware you are armed. As policy stands, the only person who can carry and do bring weapons on campus are those who do illegally, and they are the ones other students and faculty should be concerned about. Additionally, criminals fear armed citizens even more than they fear the police. A large part of deterrence stems from the fact that criminals do not know which victims would put up armed resistance, and that risk can cause second thoughts with some individuals. Gun-free zones should be aptly named defense-free zones because 19 major shootings in the last 10 years, including another just this week at Virginia Tech, stands as evidence that campus gun bans are ineffective at keeping students and faculty safe. Carry campus proponents cannot guarantee that allowing concealed weapons would have affected the outcomes of these shootings, but as policy stands, the only outcome guaranteed not to occur is a lawfully armed citizen saving lives. Finally, when it comes to budget issues, curriculum, and educating students, university officials rightfully have the final say. But when deciding whether someone should be able to possess the tools to effectively defend themselves, the legislator is responsible to represent the rights of citizens. The state of New Hampshire already holds sole authority to regulate firearms. This preempts further restrictions by all other political bodies in the state, including the university system. So this bill simply serves to emphasize and correct the blatant disregard of the state law by the university system. In this upcoming session, legislators should consider this bill in the light of facts and reason that justify allowing licensed law-abiding citizens the option of effective self-defense. Permitting state universities to continue to disregard the law and deny this option to students and faculty based on fear-driven myths and misconceptions is a serious mistake that New Hampshire cannot afford to make. And that is the end of the article. Kind of an interesting opinion piece, and I agree with I agree with the core here that responsible licensed carrying or permit carrying individuals should be permitted to carry on campus for their own safety. I mean, he makes a good point. You know, the people that are uncomfortable with the thought of being around someone that may or may not be carrying. Do these individuals have the same fear when out in public? I mean, when I'm standing online somewhere waiting to pay for groceries or something like that, I don't know whether the people around me are carrying, and the thought really doesn't cross my mind. And they probably aren't aware that I've got a gun on me, probably 99% of the time when I'm outside of the house and in a place where I'm permitted to carry. So it's kind of interesting. I agree. You know, we're talking about adults here. You know, this is a college is a place where adults are, so it just kind of makes sense to allow these people to be adults and defend themselves when necessary by allowing them to have their choice of concealed carry weapon on them. That last little bit of string there was just all jumbled and whatnot, but you understand the sentiment. I'm just sort of tripping over my own words at this point. At this point in the show, I like to feature other people's stuff. My objective here is to start talking about something and make you stop and think, that sounds interesting. I think I'll go check that out. And to do that, all I do is I look around on Google Reader through all my various subscriptions. I look at Twitter, Facebook, and I just pick out some interesting stuff and show them to you. Talk to you about a little bit of it, and make an attempt to whet your interest or whet your palate or spark your interest. Insert fancy term here for making you interested, or insert clever term or clever phrase, and get you to go check it out for yourself. Now, originally I was going to do 2 pieces of featured content because I only did 2 pieces of news, and being as hectic as this week has been, I just thought 2 was a nice round number to keep the show flowing. However, both of the pieces of content I have are from or about Julie Golub, so I didn't want to make this the Julie Golub featured content portion of the show I mean, I've done it many times before with like Miguel from Gun Free Zone, and I just did the entire featured content section based on what I read over at Gun Free Zone. However, I wanted to add a third piece of featured content in there just to break it up a little bit. But the first piece of featured content came from Twitter. It was shortly after Julie was back from Moscow, and she posted a link to a Russian blogger who was at the event and did some video and some photos and text on the event, on the Moscow Open. So I clicked through the link and I started checking out all the videos. Now, this is for the IPSC Moscow Open. Now, I'm not quite sure how to explain it, but IPSC and USPSA are very similar. I believe IPSC is sort of the parent organization, and USPSA is the United States portion of the organization, or the United States-based leg of the organization. However it works to phrase it, you know, the sports are very similar. So, you know, I was very familiar with what I was watching when I started looking at the videos. And, you know, I thought these things were really cool. There's a lot of them. Apparently, the event was 18 stages over 2 days, which is pretty impressive. The most stages that I've shot in a day has been 6, and I mean, maybe if the pace were moving and people weren't stopping to pace targets and reset steel and things like that, maybe I could shoot more stages in the course of a day. But shooting 12 just seems like an endurance test. And you know, I was going through and I watched all 18 videos. I'm just going to assume there are 18 videos. There's a lot of them. And you know, I thought it was really interesting watching some of these people shoot different stages and how they address them. I'm not familiar with any of them other than Julie Golub, who I think is in one video, maybe 2. But the one really interesting stage, and I don't remember where it falls or what stage number it was, but it was like the swinging target from hell. I thought it was fantastic. Basically, there's a target and no shoot in the middle, and then there are like 4 other no shoots kind of pulled off of it to make this oddball shape. And then actually I don't remember how it worked, but when you actuated this popper, it engaged the swinger. Now this single swinger had like 4 targets on it that you had to shoot, and as this thing was spinning, the target that you had to shoot became visible between 2 no-shoots, and it disappeared pretty fast. Now, fortunately, based on what I read in the stage description, or just in the little blurb, you only needed to shoot that target once. So 4 rounds on this target that's spinning around between all these no-shoots may seem fairly simple. Okay, you only have to hit it once and move on, but it just seemed incredibly difficult. It looked like a ton of fun. I'd love to try that at some point. I don't know that you would ever see anything like that in USPSA, because all of these targets are, I don't know, they kind of look like turtle shells. They're kind of weird, but I would love to see something like that here at a local match. I think it would be a ton of fun. Okay, here it is. It's 5 no shoots and 4 targets that you have to shoot. It's pretty cool. I'll see if I can embed that video directly into the show notes, and then after you watch that and see how awesome it is, you can click through the link and look at the other 17 videos. But really cool stuff, definitely worth checking out. The second piece of featured content I have for you is the Road Gunner podcast, episode 25. Road Gunner is one of the very few podcasts that I can say I've listened to every episode. It's a fairly new podcast, which makes it a little easier for me to say that, but earlier this week, I don't remember whether it was late last week or over the weekend, I listened to both Empty Mags and Road Gunner, the latest episode of both. And the episode 25 of the Road Gunner podcast had me a little curious, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to be getting into when I hit play. The episode is entitled "Father Doesn't Know Best," and basically, the unnamed trucker is sitting down with his father, who is anti-gun, and he conducts an interview with him. And the the stuff that I saw on the Gun Rights Radio Network forum and on Facebook and Twitter led me to believe that this was going to be a really tense interview, and there may be things in the podcast that are going to kind of enrage me as a pro-gun person. And I wasn't quite sure how I was going to feel about listening to an interview with an anti-gunner and how it was all going to work, because I was I don't know, I was feeling the build-up for the tension and how anti-gun this was going to be. But I clicked play, I started listening, and it really wasn't bad at all. It was interesting. It wasn't like the unnamed father was thumping on his thumping his fist and preaching anti-gun propaganda, or however you want to look at it. But he conducted kind of like an honest interview where he spoke his mind, spoke his heart. This is the way he felt about the subject, and this is why. And while I didn't agree with any of it, I thought it was a really good interview, and it was a nice opportunity to get kind of a peek into someone's mind that doesn't have the same beliefs that I do regarding guns. And it was conducted in a very calm and just laid back way that, even though you didn't agree with what he was saying, and the whole interview I'm sitting here shaking my head, no, that's not right, I don't believe that at all. It was still a very laid back, controlled kind of environment, and I really enjoyed listening to the interview. In addition to that, apparently Rogue Gunner's father is kind of a history buff, and that part of the interview I thought was pretty interesting too, where he started talking about the Civil War and the tie-ins with his feelings on guns. And being a history buff and having more education on the subject than most people, I was really surprised at some of his views on currently carrying firearms and how he viewed the Second Amendment and things like that. So I thought the whole interview was really interesting. I was kind of getting into the talk about the Civil War and stuff like that, but it was interesting. But my favorite part of the interview was the stuff that I agreed with. There's the stuff that I kind of connected with, and that was the Civil War stuff. I've always been interested in military history. I'm not very well educated on it. I just find it very interesting. But I kind of connected with him at that point. It was kind of really into what he was saying about the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and things like that. And I enjoyed that part the most. However, it was really interesting getting kind of a peek inside of his head on how he felt about gun control and things like that. Again, didn't agree with it, but it was a laid back interview, and it was nice to listen to for educational purposes, I guess, as an inside look at someone's anti-gun feelings. Man, I really butchered the end of that, but I'm not re-recording it, so let's move on to the last piece of featured content. For the last piece of featured content, I have another piece on Julie Golub, and I came across this one kind of on Twitter, or the basis was from a tweet from Julie, and what it boils down to is I'm not on Twitter as much as I used to be, mainly because TweetDeck, which is the application I use on my phone, is kind of finicky, and sometimes it crashes. Actually, it crashes more often than it should, which really, I guess, ideally should be 0, but it crashes pretty frequently when I don't check it often enough. And every hour and a half, 2 hours, I'll grab my phone and I'll just sort of skim the Twitter timeline. I'll just kind of hit the screen, and things will start scrolling. And I try to keep an eye out as this thing is scrolling by. I keep an eye out for all the people that I talk to semi-regularly, and when I see their icon, I kind of stop and look at what they're saying, and then I just sort of roll the screen again, and it kind of looks like a slot machine with all the stuff flying past. And when I see someone else that I talk to, I stop it and I'll look, and that's kind of how I deal with having, I don't know, that's kind of how I deal with following, I don't know, over 1,000 people. But because Julie Golub is one of the very few TV personalities or professional anything that seems to use Twitter themselves, I kind of keep an eye on her, and she responds to tweets, which is awesome. So when she tweets something, I try to keep an eye out for it, and I just kind of look for her icon as I'm scrolling through there. But anyway, I stopped scrolling and I looked at something she tweeted, and she had mentioned that she was going to be on Shooting USA this particular day for the pro tip session. And I just happened to get home early on Wednesday, and the reason the day makes sense or is important is because Wednesday Night at the Range comes on Wednesdays on the Outdoor Channel, and more often than not I forget it's on and I end up missing a large chunk of the shows. Well, I got home early enough to catch the first airing of Shooting USA, and Julie Golub was doing a pro tip. So because she tweeted it, and you know, I appreciate her commenting back and things like that when you tweet her, I decided to sit down and watch it. Not that I wouldn't have anyway, but I watched it because she said, hey, you know, doing a pro tip. So it was just more of a reason to watch Shooting USA, I guess. But anyway, toward the end of the show, she did a pro tip on dry fire, and it was pretty simple. It was 4 positions of dry firing. Basically, hands relaxed at sides, you know, draw the gun from the holster, press out, get a clear sight picture, press the trigger. And she suggested doing this like 25 times. And then after you were finished with that, you move to another position, the surrender position, wrists above shoulders, and then you go through the motions again, doing everything slow and smooth, and getting the rhythm down, and developing muscle memory. And then from there, it was strong side only, and how she handled it, or how she did it and handled the gun. And you know, it was kind of all stuff that I've seen and read before, but what really caught my attention was her transitioning from strong hand to weak hand for weak hand only. I've always struggled with this, and I'm not quite sure why, especially the first couple of times I tried it. Transitioning the gun from my right hand to my left hand always felt really, really weird, and it creates, or it forces me to focus a whole lot on what I'm doing. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of focus, because early on when I was doing it, I found that my trigger finger, or my index finger, was inside the trigger guard, and it was just, for whatever reason, it would just wind up in there. It wasn't like touching the trigger or anything, but it was freaking me out and driving me nuts, because I didn't want to be doing that at a match and have my finger inside the trigger guard. And it forced me to focus a tremendous amount on what I was doing, so that my index finger was against the slide of the gun, just like it would be in my right hand, which is sort of, I don't know, comes naturally. That's just kind of where it goes. My left hand, however, because I wasn't using it enough for weak hand only shooting, I didn't have that muscle memory in it. It was really difficult to break the habit of sort of curling my hand up to transfer the gun, and just my finger would end up in the trigger guard. Basically, what she was doing was, when she draws the gun from her holster, her finger is not on the slide of the gun. She's grabbing it low with her entire hand and pulling it out of the holster, and kind of making a fist around it. So her index finger is not on the slide of the gun, it's down low, and she pulls it out and transfers it over to her left hand. And as she's doing it, her left hand is always kind of flat and out, so that the gun kind of goes into her hand, and she wraps her hand around it and goes from there. And I thought, wow, you know, that seems like that would do the trick. It looks a lot more comfortable. I wouldn't be fidgeting with two index fingers, you know, somewhere on the gun. So I gave it a shot, and it was really comfortable. I tried it a bunch of times. I did this drill, all 100 draws, 2 or 3 times, I believe. And not only did I do this, I kind of added in the Doug Koenig stuff that I watched too. So I would do draw, press out, press the trigger, hands up. You know, I would do all of Julie's stuff, and then I would do the first 2 all over again. However, I would do a speed reload after it. So I would leave the gun, I would rack the slide so that the striker was cocked and ready to go. I would have no magazine in the gun. The magazine would be on my mag pouch. So at that mental signal when I said go, I would draw the gun, press out, align the sights, press the trigger, and then I would go through the motions of doing a speed reload. I would sort of twist the gun out, hit the mag release button. There'd be no magazine in it, but I'd be going through the motions. I'd draw the magazine from my mag pouch and insert it into the gun, press back out, and press the trigger again. There would be nothing would happen when I would press the trigger the second time, because I would have to manually rack the slide. But it was excuse me, I think it was good practice in getting in the speed reloads, and I don't know, it made for a lot of dry fire practice, and I found it to be a lot of fun. It's not really doing a whole lot, just drawing the gun, pointing at an inanimate object, which was basically a liquor bottle on a shelf, is what I was aiming the gun at, and my booze shelf that is tremendously low on stock. But at any rate, I was going through the motions and doing these dry fire drills, and I found them really interesting. So if you're interested in seeing what was going on in this pro tip, Shooting USA has Julie Golub's pro tip on their website, and I'm actually kind of looking at it now, and they have nice clear pictures of what I'm talking about, where she grabs the gun low and transfers it over. So definitely head over to Shooting USA and check it out, and I don't know, maybe incorporate it into your dry fire practice routine. Welcome to the cigar and drink pairing portion of the show. This is one of my favorite parts, where I get to combine two passions. Well, the gun part of the passion is the rest of the podcast. The other part is incorporating cigars into the mix. And this week I decided not to do coffee, which may be a big surprise. I still have a ton of that Folgers premium coffee that my wife bought the other week, but I want to do a bit more coffee in the future. Probably after Christmas, I'm going to try to get back into doing different types of coffee. I guess it was before Christmas last year when I bought my wife the Keurig machine. We were doing a lot of we were buying different whole bean coffee and grinding it up, and I was buying a lot of coffee from Black Dog Coffee, which makes single origin coffee. It's not blended, and they're basically all the beans come from the same farm or the same general region. It's the same type, and it's not a blend to create a fancy coffee. It is what it is. And I always found the coffee to be really great stuff, and they have a variety of different types to choose from. And I think after Christmas I'm going to try to get back into doing that again. It was a bit of a hassle with grinding up a small amount of beans to put in the My K-Cup adapter for the Keurig machine, but I think what I'm going to do is order a half pound of have a couple of different types of coffee, grind up a small portion of it, and then just kind of scoop it out and put it into the My K-Cup thing for the episodes. So in the future, look out for more coffee. This particular episode, I'm just finished off the last of my Gentleman Jack. It's a Jack Daniel's product. It is Jack Daniel's, except for the Gentleman Jack, I believe, is filtered one or two additional times to smooth it out. It tastes like just a smoother Jack Daniel's. I'm not a big Jack Daniel's guy. I never have been. And the whole reason I bought Gentleman Jack to begin with is because I went to a cigar event one time where they were pouring Gentleman Jack, and after a lot of cigars, this stuff just started tasting really good. Probably after a lot of Gentleman Jack too, but I came home and I decided, I need to get a bottle of this. I brought it home, and it just wasn't the same. I didn't really like it, but I was sort of chipping away at the bottle over, I don't know, it's been well over a year since that bottle has been sitting up on my shelf, and I just now finished it. It's not bad, but I'm just not a real big fan of Jack Daniel's, and this is just kind of a smoother Jack Daniel's. So if you like Jack, you'll probably like Gentleman Jack, and if you're kind of on the fence because you think Jack Daniel's is a little rough, give Gentleman Jack a try. It's a bit smoother. The cigar that I'm pairing it with is an Oliva product. It is the Cane F, and this is a Robusto size. Now, I don't remember when it was, whether it was 2 years or 3 years ago, but I was at an IPCPR trade show, and I was talking with Jose Oliva, and he was telling me about his idea of creating the super cigar. Basically, he's a big fan of Mercedes and Mercedes AMG, and he compared one of his cigars to, or he compared one particular line to the Mercedes, and he wanted to make the AMG. So he wanted this sort of super cigar, or super, well, as compared to the super car, and shortly after, I don't know whether it was the next year or whatever, the Cane F came out, which was the ultra full-bodied line of the already full-bodied cigar line in Cane. Cane is straight Ligero. It's, from what I understand, it's all Ligero, and it's fairly smooth, but it is very potent. It really does hit you hard. If you're sensitive to nicotine levels, these may give you the shakes and make you uncomfortable, make you a little nauseous. If you like full-bodied cigars, you're not going to experience that at all. But the Cane line of cigars is a bit full for a lot of people. A lot of people also like them, but the Cane F is even fuller yet. So the cigar I'm smoking is the fullest of the full-bodied cigar line, and I quite enjoy these. I find them a bit one-dimensional. There's not much flavor change at all from what you get when you start the cigar is more or less what you get when you finish it. There's a little bit of progression where it gets a bit fuller along the way, but there's no real change in flavor from start to finish. There's a bit of a woody flavor, a little bit of a salty quality to it. There's some spiciness through the nose, but aside from that, you're just getting a very full, very smooth cigar, and it's surprising how smooth the cigar is for how strong it is. A lot of times, when you smoke these cigars that are billed as really full-bodied, they're really aggressive on the palate. They're kind of harsh, and from the way it was explained to me in the past, a lot of times what manufacturers are calling really full-bodied cigars are just under-fermented cigars. They're cigars that haven't been, or maybe not under-fermented, but under-aged cigars. So you're getting a bit of a harsh tobacco as opposed to something that's properly aged and smoothed out. So I think the cigars are really good. They're a bit full for some people, but if you're feeling brave or you just kind of like full-bodied cigars, they're definitely worth a shot. The Robusto is not my favorite size in the line. I by far prefer the Lancero. However, the Lancero is not a standard production cigar, and you kind of got to jump through hoops to get them. My fallback is the Robusto. After that, I kind of like the Cane F Nub, which is I believe it's a 4-inch long cigar by 60 ring gauge. The Robusto is probably 5 by 50. If you're interested in trying these cigars, I haven't checked with Mike over at Buckhead, but I would assume since he carries other Oliva product, he would also carry the Cane line. So if you're interested in trying them, reach out and get in touch with Mike over at Buckhead Cigars. You can do that by giving him a call at 404-844-0400. You can also check his website, askthecigarguys.com, to see what he has on sale. And you can reach out to him on Twitter or Facebook, and he is Buckhead Cigar. So get in touch with them any way you prefer. Again, Mike is my preferred retailer, so if you're looking to try these cigars, I would urge you to give Mike some business and not only support a cigar guy, but a gun guy as well. At this point in the show, I would generally have a discussion topic for you. Pick something that I felt like talking about and just kind of run with it. Shooting from the hip, no notes set up or anything like that, just kind of speaking my mind. However, earlier on in the show I mentioned that I hadn't had anything come to mind to do on the show, and I still don't have anything in mind. And to my amazement, I was looking at the time of the podcast, and I'm at about 50 minutes now already. I'm not quite sure how I trimmed down portion of the podcast and still wound up with being over what I expected time-wise. So in the interest of keeping the show really relatively short, or under an hour, and just because I don't have anything for it and I'm not really feeling it at this point, I'm just going to kind of kill the featured discussion topic for this episode. There will be one next time. I'll figure something out. But earlier today, I posted just a random question on Twitter asking if anyone would be interested in doing a video chat that I could pull and stick in this, in any episode for that matter, and just kind of do a Skype video chat. Since this is a video podcast, it only makes sense to do a video chat. But, you know, I asked, would anyone be interested in doing just a video chat on a gun topic and just kind of using it on the podcast? I had a couple of people show interest, so maybe in future episodes I'll be able to figure something out for coming up with a gun discussion topic and doing a Skype video call and recording it and using it for the featured content or featured topic. God, all this featured stuff. I got to figure out a way to streamline this, but I'll use that video call for the discussion topic portion of the show. So that's kind of what I've got in the back of my mind for going forward. That won't be the case for every episode. However, I would like to get some of them peppered in here and there. If you're interested, if you're interested, and you don't mind showing your face on camera, let me know, and we'll set something up if it works out. But that's going to do it for the show. I want to thank you for watching episode 19 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltandPA.com. I appreciate the continued support. I've been getting a little less feedback on the last podcast, but the show is still growing slowly but steadily, and I think that's awesome. So if you want to reach out and get in touch with me, you can do that on my blog, which is waltandpa.com. You can email me directly at walt@waltandpa.com. I'm on Twitter as @WaltW. I am on Google Plus and Facebook, as well as a couple of different gun forums. So look me up, get in touch with me if you want to talk about something on the show, you would like to hear me talk about something on the show, or you just want to talk about guns and stuff, or cigars too. I can do cigars. So with all that said, thanks for watching, and I will catch you later.